got Kentucky, we've got West Virginia in the house. Where is everyone coming from? Don't forget to tell us where you're coming from, what kind of business you have. We definitely want to recognize everyone. We're going to get started in another 2 minutes. We like to wait till about 3 minutes after the hour just to give people a chance to come in. So we see massage therapy, real estate investing, and credit restoration. Sacramento, hey Rick. My business is Techie Sports Gear utilizing contactless payment and NFC technology. That's a whole lot, Rick, but that is the wave of the future. So I love that. We got Little Rock, Arkansas. We've got Atlanta, DC, doing natural foods. Natural foods is huge, right? Natural everything is just huge right now. So great business to be in. DC in the house again. And Dr. Sheila's in DC. So proud member of the SRB. Oh, you work with, okay, this is Amber. Proud member of the SRB Communications team, here to support our outstanding CEO. Well, welcome, Amber. So glad to have you here today. Everybody, don't forget to put your city and state in the chat. Let us know where you're coming from and what your business is so that we can definitely recognize you. And I'm also here, I can see Facebook here. Oops. Let's see here. Yeah. So, and then I want to open up my YouTube as well. Sorry, just to acknowledge everyone there. And then we are going to get started. Just give me one more second, everybody, just so I can, yes. Just give me one. Okay, there we go. So, hello, everybody. Today's conversation is all about Black wealth and Black business. We're here with the lovely Dr. Sheila Brooks of SRB Communications. When I read her outstanding bio, she's done so much that we are going to be blessed today. She is an Emmy award-winning marketing, media, and communications executive, former television anchor and executive producer. She's a founder, president, and CEO of SRB Communications, which is an advertising, marketing, and PR agency. And in 2011, her company received the highest honor from corporate America when it was named Supplier of the Year by the National Minority Supplier Development Council. Again, National Minority Supplier Development Council. If any of you have businesses and you are trying to do business with Fortune 1000 companies, this is the organization you need to be a part of. So one of the things when we start talking about Black wealth, and we know, for example, we talked a couple of weeks ago, or I think it was last week, about Citigroup putting out that report about the fact that the US economy is losing or has lost like 14 or 16 trillion dollars because it has not properly invested in Black businesses and Black home ownership. And now you have banks like JP Morgan Chase, et cetera, saying, hey, we have money specifically earmarked for Black businesses. I did that live about a week and a half ago. So it's called like, will the $17 billion trickle down to us? So if you all are looking for it, you can find it on our YouTube channel, go to Black 10K Project in order to find that. But there are a lot of companies out there that are specifically earmarking dollars for Black businesses. And one of the things that I'm super excited to talk with Dr. Sheila about is, you know, if you want to leverage the National Minority Supplier Development Council, like she has, how has she done that? Also, just understanding the bridge between Black wealth and Black business. So she also, I'm reading more of her bio, serves as the lead strategist, rainmaker, and closer for the agency. And those of you who don't know what a rainmaker is, that is a super salesperson. They know how to bring the dollars in. So she's received more than 200 entrepreneurial and journalism awards for her work. So everybody give a virtual hand clap to Dr. Sheila Brooks. Woo! Welcome. why don't you start off with just telling us how you got into business? You know, how did it all get started for you?
Well, I want to first of all thank you and the 10K Project for having me here today. A special thanks to all of you out there virtually in the audience who have tuned in. We really appreciate you joining the conversation today, and we will be taking questions, and I can answer as many of them as I can. So I want to thank all of you to begin with. I got started in the business because when I was younger, I came from a very impoverished and underserved community from, as we like to say, humble beginnings
Mm-hmm.
in the a very poor neighborhood in Kansas City, Missouri. And growing up in that kind of an environment, you yearn for so many things in life. And my mom was there to give that to us, which was teaching us the value of education and the value of a strong faith-based foundation, as well as the value of just principles. And in doing all of that, she instilled in us that it was up to us, because she never had more than a grade school education, for us to go out and figure out what it was that we had to do in our career.
Mm-hmm.
I knew then that I needed to be in business. If I was going to be in control of my own destiny, whatever that would be, that business was the way to go. But I also knew I could read, I could write, I had these strong presentation skills. And so there has to be a means to an end.
Mm-hmm.
And in looking at that, I got pulled into journalism in my high school years and throughout college, and that's how I started in the television industry and spent so many years there before I started my own business. So I knew you had to have this foundational base. You have to have knowledge of the area that you are going to go in business in. You have to have the expertise. And for us as African Americans, and particularly as African American women, we have to always be better in whatever it is that we do. My mom always told us, be the best of whatever you do,
Mm-hmm.
be the best of whoever you are. And from that, I grew into having a career in television journalism and spent a little bit of time in newspapering, and then took that knowledge, took that expertise when I just finally got fed of that newsroom of being, at the top of the profession, but still number two or number three on the totem pole in career advancement. And when I didn't see people who looked like me getting advanced and they had higher positions, when was that going to happen for me? And so finally, after about 13 years in television news and in 1990, I decided that I was going to go in business. And it's 30 years later. We celebrated our 30 years in business this year.
Fantastic. You know, my family also told me you have to be three times better
Yes,
than everyone else. And there was a time when um, I was like, why, and sometimes we go through this, it's unfair, right?
yes.
Now I'm 45 and I'm grateful that we do have to be three times better for one simple reason. It does force us to be really, really great at our craft. And
Right.
yeah, things are unfair, so we'll never be the people here to say it's not unfair. However, it I think there is a competitive advantage to that in a way, you know. What do you think about that?
Oh, I do think that you have to be determined. You have to
Mhm.
persevere. Being an African American woman business owner has a struggle of its own,
Mhm.
because we struggle with what a viable business model is.
Mhm.
And time again, all we're doing is reinventing ourselves, re-engineering the business so that we can be better.
Yeah.
And yes, you are so right. The journey can be weary, but what happens along the way, that makes us stronger. And what I also learned was, to overcome insurmountable odds, you have to have a clear vision and purpose in life. And I learned very early on that my vision in life was rooted in myself. And my purpose, as I shared earlier about what my mom said, was to be the best that I could be.
Mhm.
So I understand that you do have to be better, but you know how you fulfill that mission? You surround yourself with people who are smarter than you.
Yeah.
You commit yourself to excellence and to quality. You become a risk taker when you talk about being a business owner, because I come from the fact that success is more likely when the primary goal is the passion to create something of value.
Mhm. So years ago, I tell everybody to listen to this specific recording. It's only on YouTube now. I don't know if you can buy it anywhere else, but it's called Speed Wealth by a guy named T. Harv Eker.
Wow.
So EKER. It's called Speed Wealth. It's like how to build $1 million business in 3 years or less, right? You can find it on YouTube. You mentioned business models, and you mentioned, finding viable business models. And one of the things that he said that always stuck with me, 15 years later from listening to it, is we as business owners, the most viable, profitable thing we have is the business itself,
Mm.
right? So many times as a business owner, and I've been a business owner full time for over a decade now, probably about 13, 14 years. Um, you may or may not have a 401k, right? Sometimes, business is going really well. And at that time, I like stack up my savings, like I'm very frugal. And then other times you will be 6 months dipping into your savings just to pay, pay your living expenses while you're going up and down with business. So I say that full-time entrepreneurship is not for everybody. Everybody can be an investor, but not everybody can be an entrepreneur. But I would love for you to talk about building Black wealth and us using our businesses as vehicles of wealth, whether we want to pass our businesses down to our kids or whether we want to sell those businesses and have a healthy retirement. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are with regards to that.
Well, one of the key reasons for the racial wealth gap is that African American households, they hold these lower levels of business and financial assets, just as my mom did as we were coming up. She was a divorced mother with two small children, and one of the key reasons for that racial wealth gap is business ownership, because business ownership seems to be an important means to narrow that gap. But as you said, so many of us don't know how to get in business, how to stay in business. We've historically, as African Americans, been challenged because we don't know how to secure the resources, capital, education, experience, access to markets. We need all of that in order for us to start and grow businesses. And what history has shown us is that that always equates to power. Because what we really know is that wealth is the one remaining ingredient that's still missing from the African American power base. But we who own Black businesses, we have to push through those economic barriers. And I think for us, the best way to create Black wealth is through entrepreneurship. And we have to make sure that we keep that money within the community, so that we can grow our own businesses. And there's all kinds of strategies for doing that. We have to invest in some of the financial institutions. We have to share and create data for our African American business owners, and just gain the knowledge and share the knowledge with each other. Because yes, it is very, very tough to be a business owner. But I think a good friend of mine and business owner, Willie Jolly, said,
I know Dr.
everybody
Willie
knows
Jolly.
Willie, everybody
Yes,
knows him, but he
yes.
said
And he
it
has a
best.
beautiful wife too.
Yes, he does indeed. I know them well, but I'll tell you, he always says it best. Tough times don't last forever. Tough
Mhm.
people do. Okay. And that's what has to happen. No, Not all of us are able to stay in business and have a full-time business, but if
Mhm.
that is really what your passion is, and what your goal is and what you aspire to do, then you have to do it. He also said a setback is a setup for a comeback. So
That's right.
when things are down, you have to figure it out. You have to use those resources. And for me, my unshakable faith to get you through. I mean, and that's what it takes: determination, perseverance, because nobody gets to be a successful leader on their own. To whom
Mhm.
much is given, much is required.
That's right. Last night we had a gentleman named Marvin Powell on for we every Monday we do a fireside chat, and he talked about being a servant leader, and he is a father, a husband. He leads his own company, etc. And one of the big things people think that being a leader is barking orders, right?
Right.
However, being a leader really is, having a vision, figuring out where the ship is headed, let's say, and then getting people on your team to help you row, there, and filling their needs, as you're getting to whatever destination you're looking for within the business. So I do think that that's important, what you're talking about here. I want to go back to the business models and the viable business models, because I do think that, so I've been a business plan writer for close to a decade, helped a lot of companies raise a lot of money, right?
Mhm.
A lot of times people come to me and they say, I need a business plan, right? And I say, okay, tell me what your business is. And I find myself having to really counsel people on structuring their business, not LLC or Inc., but like, what is the business model? How is this company going to make money? Who do you need on your team? What are the financials? All of that. So when you mentioned, having a viable business model, and a lot of times we as people, we don't get that kind of business training, and
No.
we don't really seek it out because I think sometimes people don't really know that's missing in their toolkit. So I
Mm.
wanted you to talk about that, talk about various business models that are out there, in terms of how you're helping people. And I'd like to pick a couple of the businesses that are in the chat here as well, and maybe have you, give some advice with those individuals with regards to how they can set up a business model. And before you go, I'm sorry, if anybody has a business they're thinking about and they're unsure of how to put the business together in terms of a business model, put that in the chat as well, because I may select you and we may go through that, because I think that that's important. So go ahead, Dr. Sheila.
Well, I think that to answer the question is what is a viable business model?
Mhm.
It's different for everybody. But here's the one thing that I do encourage, particularly African Americans, to do is to write the plan. You have to write it down. You have to have a roadmap, a blueprint. That's really important. We help our clients develop their brand and their positioning and strategies. And we do that through cross integrated media formats, broadcast, print, multimedia, social media for marketing and advertising
Mhm.
campaigns. In order to do that, we have to develop the strategic plans for them, as well as have that plan for ourselves so that we can ensure that we are maintaining a profitable company, a competitive company, a viable position as it relates to customers and HR and our vendors. So it's all of that. We have to make sure that there are adequate resources to finance and maintain the operations of communications, of advertising, of marketing. And the best advice that I can give to Black entrepreneurs is stop selling what you have. Start selling what the client wants. When you
Ooh,
do that,
say that again.
yes, stop selling what you have. Sell what the client wants. And particularly in this new normal that we're living in,
Mhm.
working remotely from home. And so things have changed. Now we have a staff of 11 working from home remotely. And All of our clients are working remotely, and we have not missed a beat in 7 months.
Mm-hmm.
And that's telling for us. But one thing that has changed is that the direction of our marketing campaigns and advertising campaigns, while so much of that has been building brand awareness for whatever programs and initiatives that particular client may have, guess what the new initiative is? It's all about COVID-19. It's
Mm-hmm.
all about how we can contribute to solving the problems of the pandemic. We're working on a huge contract right now with the CDC Foundation and Howard University on stigmas in the ethnic communities and underserved communities. This is important research that we are doing, important work that we are doing. And what we had to do is we had to change the direction a little bit. And your greatest asset as an entrepreneur is knowing when you need to make that change. You have to figure it out in order to continue to grow your business, and that's exactly what we had to do.
Right. So it's funny that you say that. I think there's always a delicate balance as well, because I'll tell everyone the story. Some of you've already heard it, of my mother. So my mother has a bookkeeping business, and back when she started it, QuickBooks was popular. However, there was another software called Peachtree that was
Oh, I
out there.
remember that.
Yes.
I remember that.
So I said to her when she got started, I said, focus on getting your first 10 clients. Well, the first 10 clients that came to her all used QuickBooks. So we named the company Carolyn Does QuickBooks. And this is a testimony. So this is where I'm headed here. Then somebody came to her and said, can you do this other software called Minding My Own Business? I remember the guy, and I remember her saying, yeah, we can do that. And I said, no, it's Carolyn Does QuickBooks. Now, why did I do that? It's because sometimes your clients are telling you, she had 10 clients that wanted her to do QuickBooks, and she could be a master in QuickBooks, which was smart, right?
Right.
15 years later.
Right.
And then she had this one client over here who wanted her to do something else. And I do think sometimes we as entrepreneurs also have to just be very careful of going after the shiny object and not saying, okay, yes, somebody's asking me for this, but is it still in line with our core competency, or does that shift actually make sense? So that's the one thing that I always just try to warn people about is to make sure that whatever shifts you're doing, it actually makes sense at the end of the day as well.
And you have to also within that business planning stage create
Mhm,
this compelling vision.
mhm,
You have to identify those core strategies
mhm,
that you're going to use to achieve it.
mhm.
Um, we always develop what we believe are tangible action plans because that's so important. And what's really interesting is sometimes what you want is standing in the way of what you need. So
Mm,
you have to figure it out what you need in that work in
yeah,
order for you to begin to build those relationships and grow your business strategically with your
yeah.
customers.
So Jay has a question here. He has a food. Oh, I hope Jay is a he. I'm so sorry. I
Okay.
hope. Food product business. And it says, I sometimes waffle between the model for my business, either doing business to consumer or business to business. Uh, and B2C to build awareness for my food products, and B2B to scale. It's a catch 22. Oh, you are a she. I'm so sorry. So Tawana has slapped my hand saying, you can't assume. So I apologize, Jay. Jay is a she. So she has a food product business, and trying to figure out which way to do her business model. What do you have to say with regards to that, Dr. Sheila?
Well, we all want to scale our businesses. We
Mhm.
we realize that. I mean, I don't think any of us get in business without saying, "Hey, I want to grow this business." But at some point, you have to understand what the differences are. So if you really want, to grow and scale, then you need to think about hiring people who are talented, who can be assets to you in that business. And then you have to assess whether or not you can afford to do that. That's how you scale. So for you to decide which way to go, you have to make those investments. And maybe now is not the time for you to think about scaling. You start on the other side, smaller, so that you can grow to scale. It definitely depends on the resources that you have and your financial plan and your financial resources.
Yeah. I use something called the lowest hanging fruit.
Mm,
In whenever I'm talking to somebody who, especially if you don't have a lot of resources,
right,
I always ask what's the lowest hanging fruit? Like,
right,
how can you get money in right away and then use that money and reinvest it into your business? So, if you could, for example, let's say, instead of saying brand awareness through B2C, let's say that you have something where you could ship it out to people and you could do so for the Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday. I would
mm,
say, hey, get 50 people to purchase,
right,
right? And go through that process of everything from the person finding out about it to how do they order to how do you put it together, how do you ship it, all of those things, because then you learn tremendous amounts of
right,
lessons with regard to that. And if you are able to, 50 is an arbitrary number, it depends on you and what you're offering, but um, having some sort of target like that, number one, would prove that you have something that people want. And
mhm,
number two, it will also stretch you operationally to
right,
figure out where the holes are, and that will really help with your business model as well. So,
yes.
um, Crystal Hawkins says, for folks like me in property preservation for 2 years now, that's a good business, Crystal. Um, my husband and I had to pivot to move in people and junk removal for our business. Okay.
Mhm,
Simply because simply because being at the mercy of property preservation vendors was too exhausting. Waiting for a trash out slash foreclosure clean out and lock changes for 4 months from vendors would be 1K in once 1,000 in once week, I guess once per weekend, but the opportunities are scarce. Um, so I think the pivot that you did, was great. There's a lot of trash hauling, a lot of people who are moving, period. So Dr. Sheila, what do you think about the business model that Crystal and her husband has done?
Well, it goes back to something earlier I said is you really need to sell what you believe the client wants, and
Hmm.
that's how and they clearly are doing that. And congratulations to
Yeah,
you and your husband for staying the course
yeah.
and being able to pivot, because that's what it takes. You have to be that risk taker, and you have to have guts. I call it grit. If you really want to pivot in business, and you can't stay in the same lane all the time.
Mhm.
So I think they are doing a great job. We had to do a similar thing. When I came out of television news and started the business all those years ago, we were a production company, full service production company, bought equipment room by room. You got federal government loans to do so over the years. For
Mhm.
18 years, we enjoyed a full service 6,000 square feet facility with all of the editing, videotaping, soundstage studio equipment that you can imagine.
Mhm.
And when the 2007 and 2009 recession came along, the media landscape also changed at the
Mhm.
same time.
Mhm.
Everybody was using phones for cameras. All of the editing equipment was now on laptops.
Mhm.
The networks that we were producing original programming for, they were looking at reality shows. And we had to pivot. And in order to do that, we had to look out there and say, okay, I had to say, what else can we do? Well, we
Mhm.
know we could do production well. We know video production. So what complements that? And that's when we start doing our research, and we looked at advertising and marketing, because in advertising and marketing, we were beginning to become a digital world. We also saw that we could still continue to produce videos, but those videos would be for digital world, for um, um, broadcast television, for commercials, radio
Mhm.
spots, TV spots that would be part of larger campaigns. And what we really learned was we're storytellers. If we could tell a story in news, we could tell a story in production, then we could tell a story in advertising and marketing. And that's what this young lady and young man have done, her and her husband. They looked at the marketplace and said, hey, this is what's going to work for us. And they had the guts to go do it. Kudos to you.
Good for you. Molly is asking, SRB Communications has navigated through several major economic shifts. What would be your top three lessons learned?
Well, there's a lot of lessons to learn, but I think that the top three lessons are, the one thing I would learn from the very beginning is, if you're going to borrow money, do it when you don't need it. That's the biggest lesson in banking and financing.
Mm.
Always go and get the bank loan when you don't need it, because it's going to be tougher to get it when you get into trouble, and it's
Mhm.
going to be harder to get it. So build those banking relationships up and get that credit card, get that line of credit, get it when you are at the top of bringing in revenues for your company. The second one is about having the best asset around you, which for me are all of my employees. And talent, finding and recruiting and retaining the best talent in the industry, whatever your industry is very, very important. So you have to always maintain that pipeline of knowing where to search and where to go to find the talent. It was very tough for us in the production business. I knew where all the talent was because I came out of TV news, and I had access to journalism organizations and other organizations and people. So I knew how to find talent. When we made the pivot and went into advertising and marketing, that meant I had to find other resources, advertising, marketing associations, and to look at the kinds of things that I would, resources that I would need to use there. So banking, talent, and other access to capital,
Mhm.
because I think that access to capital is so very important. And we always look to the banks for that. And it's not just the banks. There are other minority institutions out there that certainly have financial opportunities that are available for small business owners.
Absolutely. I'm also a big fan of getting to know as many people as possible from as many different industries as possible, even if you
Absolutely.
don't need them today. I will tell you, for example, so many of you know, November 2nd, we're starting our Black Family Wealth Challenge. So, more details coming about that. But I literally reached into my Rolodex for a couple of people that I haven't spoken to in like 4 or 5 years, and like, look, but I need you for this, right? So, sometimes you meet people and you just keep them in the back of your mind, or, every once in a while you reach out or things like that, because you never know when you're going to need those individuals. Rick is asking a great question here, and keep the questions coming, everybody. These are great questions. So we are in the MVP stage. So for people who don't know what that means, that's minimally viable product. So we're in the MVP stage, but wanted to pre-sell our sports wearables to raise money for manufacturing as opposed to using Kickstarter. Does Dr. Brooks have any thoughts on this strategy?
That one I'm not very familiar with. I would go back to something you did say earlier about building those relationships. I think building relationships in your business and community, particularly for him, is would be very important to do. Also, forming strategic partnerships
Mhm.
so that you can access those business opportunities.
Yeah. So I do have some thoughts, Rick. The first thought I have is uh, the number one person to talk to about that is Talisha, our
Mhm.
CTO. She probably has some really great resources for you, people that she can lead you to. I hope you remember, um, but you can reach out to her at tshine at the10kproject.com. The second thing is I've helped people, raise this type of money. If if you are able to potentially, if you already know, let's say 50 or 100 people that you could go to and say, show them the design of what you're doing, right? So you want to focus on having a really great pitch. Show them the design of what you're doing, show them what it's going to do, be very honest with them that this is beta version number one, but this is specifically what this beta version is going to help you solve, right? There are always people who are willing to be the pioneers. You got to find as many of those people as you possibly can to help you, get your manufacturing done. The second question that I would have if I were considering putting money into this is, has anyone on your team ever done manufacturing before? Who are you manufacturing with? How'd you find these people? If you tell me you went to China to find them, did you go to China to find them? Or did you go online and look on up some random website? Because there's a lot of scams that are happening where people are wiring money and never get any product. So those are the types of deep questions that your individuals are going to ask you. It's not just going to be about the product itself. It's also going to be about your ability to deliver the product with things that are outside of your control. So that's just a couple of things, but talk to Talisha. She may have some other resources with regards to people that she knows who have done different types of technology and has raised capital that way. So um, Bria is asking, so Dr. Sheila, how do you see your business growing or pivoting in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, that's a really good question. I think that technology is and this digital world that we live in is going to be very, very important as we move to the next 3 to 5 years. We have to use innovation uh, in order for us to become much more successful and profitable. We will have to certainly create a vision and a strategy for that so that we can make sure that we have a real clear destination and a special pathway to get there. And we have to leverage our current business networks so that we can tap into the supply chain. We're in several business verticals: higher education, transportation, utilities, which is gas, electric, and water companies, as well as convention centers and sports arenas. We are going to have to look at, and I think we did a little bit of that this year within the last 7 months of working remotely, is we have to look at what's happening with this COVID-19 pandemic. And we have now already begun that pivot into that whole public health business vertical. So we're going to have to expand those business verticals. And in order to do that, we have to have some real revolutionary ideas
Mhm.
on how we could make those verticals become successful and more profitable.
Yeah. So you mentioned the supply chain. So let's talk about the Supplier Diversity Council. If you can tell everybody, number one, what that is, And what types of businesses should consider joining something like that?
The National Minority Supplier Development Council is a national organization that simply connects major corporations to minority businesses in order for those minority businesses to do business at the major corporation. What they do is offer all kinds of resources, an annual convention, as well as training programs. And there are 22 or 23 regional councils across the country that belong to the national. And within those regional councils, that's where minority business owners can get certified in order to do business with the major corporations.
So what
And
type of major corporations are involved in actively, looking to do business with businesses like ours?
oh, there are telecom, all of your major automotive companies, major telecom companies, everybody from Ford Motors to AT&T and Verizon, some of your major utility companies. So any Fortune 100, Fortune 500 company that you might can think of is likely to be affiliated with the National Minority Supplier Development Council, better known as NMSDC.
Mhm. Rick is asking, is it tough to secure certification if you are a startup?
You must be in business at least 2 years, usually, and in any of those regional councils that would certify you. And that's because they have to see, there are a few things that they have to decide on in order to certify you to become a business owner. One, to ensure that you are a bona fide business owner, that you're looking to grow your business, that you pay taxes, that you have an office space, that you can provide the services and products that you say you can, and in a timely and efficient manner. Because when you are working with major corporations, you have to, you have to also learn how to navigate their procurement system. As a business leader, you have to have exceptional leadership skills, and the technical know-how, because living in this new age of this digital world, those companies need to know that minority businesses or small businesses can provide those services to them.
Right. So I know a lot of people who do business with the government, and I think that these Fortune 500 organizations are the same way. So in the government, what I explain to people is, yes, there are government set-asides. However, if that government, they call it a contract administrator, if they believe that your company cannot do the task, no one in the government has ever gotten fired from hiring IBM or some huge company to come in and do a task, even if they mess it up, right?
Right.
However, people could get into trouble with their careers, could get fired, could get set back if they hire you and you are not able to do what you say you can do. So I always tell people to prepare so much that the person feels extra comfortable with your process of actually being able to deliver. Dr. Sheila, I'd love for you to comment on that.
Well, I think you really said that very eloquently. We as African American owned businesses and or minority owned businesses, we have to be better than any other company out there. We have to show major corporations that we have the stability within our companies, the capacity within our companies, full-time employees, and in some cases, you may have some subcontractors and vendors, but you have to be able to provide the services to those companies. Think about it. These companies are, many of them are publicly traded companies. They
Mhm.
have larger holding companies. And in order for us to show our strength as African American owned businesses or small businesses, we have to be experts, as I like to say, at what.
Mhm.
And we have to make sure that we have the talent within our companies to do the work. And
Mhm.
you can't, unfortunately, unless you are a consultant, you can't just be a one person business when you're trying to do business with those kinds of major corporations, because they're looking for capacity. They're
Mhm.
looking, and we still, even being in business 30 years,
Mhm.
we still fight that every day. And capacity means not only financial capacity, do you have a line of credit? Can you go with past 45 or 60 days and still pay people, still
Right.
pay your vendors, still pay your employees, because you just might not get paid in that timely of a fashion with with a major corporation, and particularly during this pandemic, because things change.
Mhm.
And so, and just like with the government, you mentioned it, and within the government, you must have that kind of capacity,
You have
particularly
to.
financial, because if you don't, you could forget it, because you may not get paid for 60 or 90 days.
Mhm.
I was a federal government contractor for 18 years, 100%. And it could happen because you never know if those budgets are just right there to be tapped at that time, and it could take them longer for payment. And then you have to have the capacity within your team. You have to have full-time employees who can do the work. You can't do all the work. You can't be the CEO and and the person who is providing the expertise and the person who's preparing and issuing invoices. Yes, when you start out, yes, you have to be all that, but you have to grow into doing the kind of work that we do and so many others are doing with major corporations.
And I think that goes back to our original conversation about the business model. Where are you looking to be and who are you looking to serve? And a lot of times as a startup, it helps guide your decisions. So I have another question for you, and I have to honestly admit, I don't know the answer to this. I've never looked at it. But I know, for example, that the US government spends, I think it's $500 billion a year is a US government budget. So they are, they've got payroll. I think actually the 500 billion is what they do in contractor payments, if I
Right. Yeah.
remember correctly.
And with, yeah,
Yes.
with vendor services. Yes.
Vendor services, right. So if you decide, and that's just the federal government, haven't talked about state governments and counties, and a lot of people sleep on these city governments as well. And I'm not talking about Chicago and Atlanta. I'm talking about the suburbs outside of them, right?
Right.
So in where I used to live in Fairfax, it's like the town of Vienna, or the town of Reston, if people are familiar with those places. But how big of a pot are I guess Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, this National Minority Supplier Development Council, like how much money are they looking to actually procure or spend with minority suppliers? I have no idea if you know that answer.
Well, it really differs
Hmm.
per corporation.
Okay.
I can say that. I don't think that there's the big number
If nobody's
that you
aggregated
have
the
like
big
the federal
number.
government has.
Okay.
I do know that the many major corporations, I think it's about 16 or 17 of them
Hmm.
that belong to the $1 billion round table.
Okay.
And they are looking to have to increase that spend, whatever that number is, and they come up with a number with minority businesses and other businesses across the country. But usually, every major corporation has its own spend and goals that they're looking to do.
Hmm.
Most of them, I can say, usually range 25 to 30% of whatever their overall spend is. 25 to 30% is targeted to diverse suppliers, which we would be a minority business owner or an African-American business owner or a
Right.
business owner of color. So you need to look at that. But I think the best thing and the best advice that we can give our audience, though, is that you really have to be the expert. You really have to know. Don't just know your business. When you go in there, know their business. And let me tell you something. You can't be everything to everybody. Don't go in saying, I could do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, A, B, C, D, E, F, all of these things. You can't. That's not what they're looking for. You
Right.
have to be good at 1 or 2 or 3 core competencies so that you can show that you have a track record, past performance, solid case studies of the type of work that you have already done, because that's what's going to get you in the door and keep you in the door.
Yeah. Felicia is asking a great question. For corporations that have a spend goal, are we only able to tap into those opportunities through the NMSDC?
Generally, that's where you start, because major corporations, just like the government looks at, and particularly the federal government looks at some of the different kinds of programs that they have, the MBE, the DBE, the 8A, the WOSB, the Women-Owned Business program. The same goes for corporate America. So many of those major corporations, when they are looking to do business with you, the first thing they're going to do is to see if you are NMSDC certified. Are you certified within one of those 22 or 23 regional councils within your regions across the country? Because that tells them that, as I mentioned earlier, that tells them if you're a bona fide business owner. You have checked the list. They know you pay taxes. They know you have an office space. They know what your revenues are. They know what your capabilities are. You have already been vetted within those local councils, and in that national database. That's their first go-to.
So I will say again, this is the government side, but I believe it works the same way with corporations. Is within the government, there are a lot of Black people who will get the 8A certification. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that, it is a certification like that you are a minority, right? And then there are these 8A set-asides, but the 8A certification is only good for 8 years. Well, there are people who get the 8A certification and then spend 4 years trying to get their first contract within the government. And one of the things that people have warned others against is doing it that way. So I want to go back to Felicia's comment here. So within 8A, what they say is get your first government contracts, plural, right? And then apply for 8A, and then you're able to use that 8A certification as a tool to get bigger and better contracts. So I want to come back to Felicia. There are a lot of companies in this country that make $5 million a year, $10 million a year, 20 million, $50 million, right? That are great businesses, that are not small businesses, and I put that in quotes, right? You can start off there. Prove yourself with a $5 million business. Get some case studies, 10, 20, 30. By the time 2 years occurs, depending on what you're selling, obviously, by the time 2 years occurs, you have a slew of case studies. You've worked then by that time with a $100 million company, then moving to a Fortune 500 company and getting work from them is not such a big leap. So if I don't remember what kind of business you have, but that's kind of the way that you can work that system.
Let me say this, because you are so spot on. I was 8A. That's how I grew my business. And here's what we did. In 1991, we started the business in 1990. In 1991, we went after our first federal government contract. For the 3 years prior to getting 8A, we start taking little bits and pieces of contract work with the federal government. We
Mm-hmm.
take a small writing project here. We take a small research project there. And we start building our portfolio with the federal government. And then we became 8A. And when we became 8A, then we used the 8A certification as a contracting tool. And because by then we had already built relationships within certain federal government agencies, and we could go to them and say, hey, now we have our 8A certification, so can we use that as a contracting tool?
Mm-hmm.
So you're spot on about how to work that, but I will say this, it is in that 9-year program of us being in 8A, you have to really figure out by year 4 or 5 how you're going to transition from government work to corporate work. Because as I mentioned, we were 100% federal government for at least the first 10, 11 years of being in business. And then transitioning from federal government work to corporate work was a big transition. So you do have to figure that out. You have to put that in your plan. You have to put that in your business model in order to survive. Because I know so many 8A companies, one, that they're 8A and they never got a contract in 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
So
I know a couple myself.
So it was absolutely useless for them.
Mm-hmm.
Or two, they were 8A, and when they finished that 9-year program, they were out of business.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens often, but I definitely know a couple of people who got 8A and never got a contract.
Right.
Felicia is also asking, what were some of the lessons learned with transitioning to commercial contracts?
Well, I think for me, one of the biggest lessons learned was in when I was doing a lot of work with the federal government, I could do project work. Project work meant 3 months, 6 months, but I'd always have reoccurring projects. When we made the transition to corporate America, it was really important for us to look at multi-year contracts because we were beginning to grow. I was beginning to hire more people. And in order to sustain a payroll, you have to have multi-million-dollar, multi-year contracts. So that was a big transition for us, moving from project work to multi-year contracts so that we were able to have some financial stability within the company for resources and for our talent.
Absolutely. So Crystal is saying, this is great info. I have been hesitant about starting to apply for government contracts. I only took the first step and got the SAMS number. So Crystal, first of all, congratulations. Within 10K Project membership in December, we have a woman coming on who, at least for the federal side, has worked on the inside of the federal government, being a contract administrator. She worked her way up. And now, I think for the past few years, she has been working with companies that want to get into federal government work. So stay tuned for that. She's coming, I believe, in December. So definitely stay tuned for that. I'm also going to be bringing on a couple of people to talk about state and county, because there's a lot of money in some of these counties and cities, that people can get access to. So the final question that I have here is in regards to using, again, our businesses to build Black wealth. And you mentioned having employees. We are working right now on an economic report with Eddie the economist, shout out to Eddie. And one of the things we discovered is the fact that Black wealth is being inhibited because too many of our businesses do not have employees. Mm-hmm. There's employer firms versus non-employer firms. And Eddie has some great statistics, but one of the things that he has found is that the average company without an employee makes about $60,000 a year. I think that was the number. The average company with employees makes $750,000 a year. So we are getting stifled and stumbled by the fact that we don't have employees. And that's a huge gap. And then there's huge gaps between, our white counterparts, our Asian counterparts, our Hispanic counterparts versus us. And this is one of the reasons why our unemployment rates are so high and we aren't building the Black wealth that we need to. So Dr. Sheila, is your final comment, tell me what you think about that. And you can definitely close us out as well with regards to building Black wealth and using our businesses to do that.
Well, it is very, very important for us if we want to, as Black entrepreneurs, expand our businesses, if we want to grow and scale our businesses, you can't be a business of one. You have to have a larger vision. You have to decide that, yes, I want to certainly hire employees. You can't be just the expert in everything. You have to use the talent that we have in order for us to secure more contracts, and particularly those corporate contracts, as well as government contracts. And I think that I go back to what I said earlier, the best way to do that and to create Black wealth is through entrepreneurship. We have to make sure that we are giving back to our community. We have to make sure that in doing that we're helping to grow our businesses in those communities. We, as African Americans, are more likely to hire people of color than anybody. And that talent is the best assets that you can have. I can say this, that a couple of those questions that came today on this call were from my employees. My employees who are always there to not only support the company, but to support me. They are your biggest assets. So don't be afraid to do that, because that's one way that you can certainly grow not only your business, but the be a part of the vitality of growing your community.
Well, thank you so much. How do people get in touch with you?
Oh, absolutely. They can certainly go to our website, SRB Communications, at www.srbcommunications.com. And you can find everything that you need there. On that website, there's an info account. We answer those questions often. You could see about our business, as well as we could provide you with any resources that you might have.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for being here today with us. And again, thank you, Dr. Sheila, for coming, speaking with us. Don't be a stranger. So we'll probably contact you in the 6 months and say, come on back and visit with us again. Okay.
Would love it. Would love it. And thank you again so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
What a wonderful host you have been.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye. Have a great day, everybody.